Welcome back, everybody, to the BTTB podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan, here in the garage gym, about to start a new episode. And we're here with Parker. Parker is a freshman at McKendree University, headed to Oklahoma for CNATs in about 3 weeks, we think. He started lifting or started competing his freshman year, has been playing football and powerlifting since then, has some great stories to tell us about just hard work and dedication, a little bit about things not to do as a power lifter. And it's just going to be a great episode. Parker, I want to thank you for coming on. I appreciate your time for coming on here and telling your story.
No problem. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're going to have a good time. I like to start this pretty straightforward and let the conversation go from there. But first of all, before we can get into any fun stuff, we need to know a little bit about yourself. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about what got you into lifting weights, what, that first experience under the barbell, and then tell us the story about finding out about strength sports and what got you into powerlifting.
So basically, going into my freshman year of high school, my dad was really encouraging me to start lifting because he's like, this is because I played football all the way from I was, I believe, 6 years old all the way to my senior year of high school. And going into my freshman year, my dad was like really encouraging me to start lifting. He's like, because this is the high school level now, and these kids aren't going to be like youth kids anymore. Started to lift in my garage for a little bit because my dad had an old rusty weight set. And that was the summer before my freshman year of high school. And I I wasn't really I would probably do it like 3 times a week. I would always put it off, just really wasn't my thing yet until I got to high school, and we'd have after school training 5 days a week with our football coach. And like the whole football team would come in there 5 days a week, and he'd give us lifts to do, and he's really the one who taught me how to lift and taught me how to lift. And I did kind of notice like I was stronger than a lot of the upperclassmen already as a freshman, and the more and more I just started to do it, the stronger and stronger I got, until going into my sophomore year was when my coach mentioned something to me about how he used to compete in powerlifting. And I went to my dad. I'm like, can you find me a powerlifting meet? Because this kind of sounds fun. And he found a meet for me about 45 minutes, an hour from my house, in APF. And it just kind of went off from there after I did my first meet. It was like a duck on the water.
Okay. Couple quick questions. I'm notorious for having a little bit of pet peeveness when it comes to like high school weight training. I don't know if you've ever experienced some other people coming out of the high school gyms, but technique, actual programming and things like that, I don't think have always been very good for lifters in that age. Sometimes it's kind of like, I recall back in my day, you had these charts on the walls and you would use your max and it would, two sets of 6, 2 sets of 4, and then a double. And then the next 2 days later, because you only did like 3 lifts.
Yeah.
You would do almost the same working sets, just a little bit more. With your coach having a background in competing, would you say you got a better gym program or lifting program in your high school?
I do believe so, yeah, because I believe Mondays it was squat, Tuesdays bench, and Wednesdays deadlift. And then we had the clean and jerk in there too. We would do some of that because that's, a football lift.
Yeah.
So
You
I
don't
think
always see the
definitely
jerk, but cleans are definitely a common high school lift.
right.
You don't always
And
see deadlifts in high school training blocks.
yeah, and that's just all I kind of knew was squat, bench, deadlift, and cleans. And I was just pretty naturally good at it, at all 3 of them.
Would you say that in high school, y'all were squatting or were y'all squatting? I like to parentheses that, if you know what I mean by
Yeah.
that. Were you hitting even close to depth at all?
Our coach, he definitely did get on us about depth. Because a lot of guys were only doing like barely,
Half
barely
or
hitting
quarter
depth.
squats?
Yeah, and he would, especially me too, he'd get on top of me and yell at me a lot for kind of doing my own thing, but you live and you learn.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to look, don't get me wrong. Anybody lifting the bar, you're already a step above someone that isn't.
Mhm.
But sometimes I feel like people get very inflated egos in high school gyms because you're squatting 500, but you're doing it for about 4.5 inches. Cause I've seen
Right. I
those
mean,
videos on the
yeah.
internet, and I just feel that and don't get me wrong, the movement is definitely getting better. A lot of schools are hiring actual strength coaches to coach multiple sports and things like that. And I love where it's going. But me being a lot older than you, I just have a more of a I don't know. I get a kind of nasty feeling in my gut when I talk about like high school lifting and things like that. So it sounds like you got a lot better treatment, a lot coach that had a lot more experience. So that definitely probably set you on a better trajectory than I had to sound that one out than a lot of kids in high school, no matter how strong you started. So you
Right.
said your coach was the one that kind of told you about powerlifting. Kind of tell me what was that discussion like? What did he tell you it was? Because I find it hard sometimes to get kids excited about what the sport is by just explaining that you're going to do 3 lifts and things like that. They don't realize the anxiety and the hype that you're going to get knowing that you're going to go for new PRs and stuff. So how did he sell it to you that got you so excited?
So it's kind of a funny story, but I actually knew about powerlifting before he even kind of brought it up to me because I remember I was scrolling on YouTube one day and I saw a Russell Ori video and I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I guess this is powerlifting. I mean, I believe it was when he won his first IPF World Championship, and I remember it was before one of our lifting, like when we were lifting in the weight room, the football team, and he was telling us how like what I do before every powerlifting meet is eat 2 Big Macs and a large fry, and I was just kind of like, oh. I've heard of powerlifting before. Like I remember seeing that Russell Ori video because it went pretty viral after he won his world championship. And then he mentioned it to me one day in the gym, like, I think you'd be pretty good at competing. And, because I've always listened to my coach and always listened to every word he had to tell me. So I remember I went to my dad when I got back from lifting and I was like, find me a meet and sign me up.
Mhm. Awesome. Like I said, I definitely powerlifting has got a lot bigger because of social media. Let me rephrase that. The amount of power lifters has got bigger, but unfortunately, the sport is actually on a hair decline right now because I think everybody is training to be a power lifter. Not as many people are going to do competitions. And I'll give Russell, or I mean, he's made so many powerlifting fads like squatting in J's,
Right.
eating your necklace charm. I'm like, how many videos I
Hmm.
see? I'm like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
God, can we do anything original?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
It's just funny how things like that, become fads, I guess I should say. Because
It's funny to say that. Yeah.
I'm like Jordans probably aren't the best squatting shoes, honestly, but whatever.
It's it's funny you say that because I actually do squat in J's.
I mean, a lot
I
of people do. Don't get me
I
wrong.
I did do it just because Russell Ori does it,
I
to be
see.
honest
Yeah.
with you.
I mean, if he's one of the best squatters around, so it's
Hmm.
obviously something. But I mean,
Right.
like I said, it's just funny because I don't think anybody squatted in Jay's before his videos became so popular.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sure Vans and Chuck, or mostly Chucks, have had a
Hmm.
major decrease in sales because of Russell in his powerlifting videos. All right, so we did our first meet, APF. How'd that meet go?
It was definitely new. Going into the meet, I kind of looked up videos and like how to be successful in a powerlifting meet. It went it went pretty solid for the most part. I believe I went 6 for 9 or 7 for 9. I got second out of second. I got second out of 2 people,
That's why
and someone else.
I don't like talking about places in powerlifting because I think
Right.
I've seen a lot of people brag about their first place medals in events where they only were competing against themselves.
Right.
So I try to always explain to everybody that PRs are where
Hmm.
it's at. Did your total increase? Did you hit what you thought? Because Listen here, I don't care who you are. 9 first place medals out of 1 competitors doesn't impress me. But
Right.
so didn't I mean you had an okay day. 6 for 9, 7 for 9,
Mhm.
definitely a great day. And let me so your lifting coach in high school was the influence, but he wasn't your powerlifting coach per se. You were kind of doing that on your own.
I did that on my own. He's really more the guy I look to for when I need some words of wisdom. I and
He's
he
a
was my
mentor, not
football
a
coach.
coach.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And he was my foot he was the head coach of my football team all through my years of high school. So he's really someone I look to as a mentor, and he mentioned powerlifting to me, said I'd be good at it. So I asked my dad to sign me up for meet. My first meet, it went fine. Like I said, I went
Yeah.
6 for 9, 7 for 9, and I just being honest, like as soon as I got on the platform and as soon as I got under the bar for the first time on squat, I fell in love with it. I mean, it was
I
yeah,
don't it's and we'll get into this. Well, we can get into this now actually. Two things. Being a person that didn't have a coach for your first meet and having to kind of do it all on your own. What would some of the things that cuz me and you are at a lot of meets together cuz I attend a lot of McKendree
right.
events. I see a lot of teenagers make a lot of mistakes. What would, as someone not too far off of that path, what are some of the things that you would recommend for those first time teen athletes or just first time competitors in general in the sport of powerlifting? What are the things that lessons learned that you would kind of say, hey, take a look at this or do this?
I would say take rest days because I never took a rest day until my football coach, he told me, he's like, you're not going to grow unless you don't take rest days. Cause there was a point I was lifting every single day just because of how much I loved it. I would also say not trying to max out every single day, not trying to hit like an RP 10 single every single day because a, I didn't have an actual powerlifting coach until I got to McKendree. So all through high school, I was just going to the YMCA after school every day, doing it on my own. But I would say take rest days and don't try to max out every single day. Those were two of the biggest things I regret doing.
I mean, that's
Right.
normal male teenager lifting, though. So that's why I bring it up on this podcast because I see
Right.
this. I did the same thing at 19. What kind of set range are we hitting today? Well, we hit ones 2 days ago. So let's hit ones again, because
Right.
I think I might put 5 pounds on my max today.
Mhm.
I feel good. I ate an extra cheeseburger, or whatever.
Right.
Rest days, I mean, as you start getting more into the science of strength or strength training, you realize that recovery, I mean, there's 3 factors into gaining muscle, gaining strength. It's training, it's nutrition, and it's recovery. That
Mhm.
makes up about 85% or 90% of what is, lifting weights, getting stronger, building muscle, whatever your factor is. But that's your 3 major categories. Everything else, supplementation, total volume, or, even specific exercises, all that takes about 10 or 15%. And the other 3
Right.
are the big thing. So, I mean, I think that's something that a lot of teenagers don't because you kind of fall in love with it and you do it all the time because you're in love with it. So I totally understand that. What about the meet
Right.
itself? So, what are some of the things that you wish you would have known ahead of time or practice more going into the meet?
So when I went 7 for 9, I went 3 for 3 on bench and 3 for 3 on deadlift, but I only got my squat opener because I missed depth on
Mm,
my second and third squat. And it was just the problem with not ever doing a meet before and not knowing the standards of depth because even in APF, like, yeah, they're a little more non-strict as USAPL with depth. They're still going to get you. And
mm.
I wish I knew depth. I would say that's about it. Just
Yeah, I mean, that's a
hitting
great one.
squat
I
depth.
find a lot of, so my personal opinion, I see way too many people think their squats are deep when they're not. I mean,
Mhm.
especially people that aren't used to like maxing out or your brain almost wants you to stop shorter when you have a heavy load on you. It's that flight or flight instinct. So I
Right.
see a lot of people miss depth, and then of course calls, commands. I see a lot of people miss commands because it's not because they don't know them, but they just didn't start practicing them early enough. You
Right.
know, you don't practice commands on Monday and then compete on Saturday. Like you need to be
Right.
practicing these muscle pauses 3-4 weeks out, so your body has built up. Hey, when I finish a squat and stand, I don't just automatically take a
Hmm.
step to rack it, because that's our natural instinct for safety is I'm up now rack, and you got to pause there. So I just think those
Right.
are some common things. And I like hearing from a lot of teenagers because y'all just did it. You're the ones that are going to influence the community a lot more than, old hairless me. So that's why I asked.
Right.
All right. So we're freshmen, sophomore. We're playing football for what is that? Usually like July through late October, early November.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you're powerlifting most of then November through like May, June.
About, I first that was when I first started powerlifting, but once I really started to get serious about it, it was my junior and senior season of football. I still tried to train for powerlifting. I'd wake up at 4 a.m. every day and I'd drive to the gym. And the Chicago Tribune actually wrote an article about me on that.
So
So it was
I just want
just
to repeat this because I don't think a lot of people have this kind of work ethic. You are waking up at what time?
4 a.m. every single day.
Training, getting to the gym probably, I'm guessing maybe around 4:45, 5 o'clock.
4:45 around
Yeah.
there, 4:30, 4:45
How long were you training from 4:45, 5 o'clock to what?
till about 7:15 a.m. around there. And
Going
I'd
to school till
and
about
then come
3.
back home. Yeah, come back home, get ready for school, eat something, go to school, and then have football practice after school. And then once I got home, I was, dead after that. I was
So
tired as can be.
what time was that? Probably 7, 8 o'clock.
Yeah, around there.
So
So
you
I'd
were
only
doing a
be up
4
for
a.m. to 7 p.m. And
Mhm.
now at this time, were you still training almost every day because that was your mindset, or were you had you learned about recovery yet?
I learned. So what I would actually do was game day was my rest day from
Okay,
lifting. And I was going about five, depending on how I felt from the game.
might take Saturday off too.
Might take Saturday off too, but I mostly looked at it as Friday nights or is rest time. So
What position did you play?
I was running back and middle linebacker.
And so you were taking, I mean, as running back, you were taking
Mhm.
some beatings, and as linebacker, you were
Yep.
you were given some beatings, which still absorbs a lot of
Hmm.
shock. So definitely some
Right.
punishment on your body. Talk me through what it was that drove you, because waking up at 4 a.m. There can only be like 1% of the teenage population that loves something that much to sacrifice that much. Because I mean, everybody knows how hard it is to wake up in the morning when it's dark outside. You're in what, central Illinois at this time. It's not
Mhm.
always warm when you wake up. It's dark. So one, where do you feel like you get that kind of work ethic and that just determination and that grit? And then what was it about lifting that made that much?
Well, I would say part of it is because I loved it so much. I love having a bar in my hands. And then another part of it too was I was kind of the kid who was always disrespected, the kid who was always picked on a lot, and especially in middle school. And I can remember freshman, sophomore year, I mean, I had teachers, I had a couple coaches, I had, classmates and friends just tell me what I could or couldn't do. And the fact that they did that just kind of lit this fire in my stomach. And it was more the training aspect of that was more of me doing that to prove them wrong.
Totally understand that.
Hmm.
That mentality of don't tell me what my limits are. I haven't even started
Right.
to even try to reach them yet type concept. I think that's a good segue as a person that played both kind of sports. And when I say both kind of sports, I mean team sports and individual sports because they're totally
Hmm.
different from a
Yeah.
mentality standpoint. Walk me through what you felt the differences were, or at least how you experienced them from like a mental standpoint, like how you had to mentally prepare, the enjoyment factor, and like what they kind of gave you. Because I think that's a lot of people understand what team sports are and what that's kind of like, but not many
Mhm.
people play a lot of individual sports. So this is a good time to kind of talk about the differences between the two from someone that lived it and breathed it just, a year or two ago.
Well, I would say with like football, like I'm not a person who's worried about the glory, who's worried about um, having everyone look at me. But with football, it's a team sport, and playing a team sport is very hard when you have people who don't care. And when you have people who just don't care to show up to lifting, don't care to show up to practice, don't care to try at practice. And that was a big part of, ever since my freshman year of football to my senior year, there were a lot of guys on my football team like that. And that just kind of drove me insane with having with not having everyone all in. So the love for powerlifting really shined brighter than football because it's just me. And all I need to do is just be all in and good things will happen.
Okay. So basically it's seeing people not put the same amount of effort into you deters your mentality because why
Right.
should you put all those sacrifices in when someone else isn't? Whereas in
Hmm.
powerlifting being an individual sport, the only thing hindering your results or your advancement in the sport is basically the amount of work and effort you're willing to put in it. I think that's it. Like I
Right.
said, perfect nail on the coffin. I think that, like I said, one of the reasons why I push powerlifting so much is because I try to turn athletes out of those kids that gave up on sports.
Hmm.
There's such a huge population nowadays that give up, at 9, 10, 11 years old for multiple reasons. One, I hate to say this, parenting and just their enforcement of you're going to do this because this is going to teach you lessons. Two, I think I think one, community as a whole has dropped down. We don't, with the internet, it's become less about the city, this town, and it's more about, hey, look at me. But then you
Right.
got the budgets and all that. So rec leagues in general
Hmm.
have just suffered from, not enough volunteers, too much money for, I mean, I know some baseball and softball coaches that are doing rec ball and they're making like $70 a game. And I'm like, why do you think we can't afford good fields and stuff like that? So,
Right.
volunteerism, there's a lot of reasons sports is a decaying factor, travel, sports, all that goes into it. So, powerlifting is one of those things where I found that if I take someone and show them that their results are only dictated by themselves, it appeals to them because so many people have suffered at the hands of a team sport. And that's why I love this sport
Hmm.
and so
Right.
much. So it's good to hear your point of view. Like I said, as someone that looks like they put 110% in everything they do and goes beyond, above and beyond almost anybody's um, expectations, I can see how it's hard to look at other people that are only giving it 50, 60% on a daily basis and how frustrating and almost off-putting that can be. Let's talk about, I'm assuming we did some more meets some our sophomore junior year, but let's go into our senior year because I know we got some stories to talk about that. We're finishing up. We're still probably training about 6 days a week at this time, correct? So we still haven't learned what
Yeah.
the word
Hmm.
recovery means.
Right.
I'm sure Brad smacked that upside your head real quick, didn't he?
Yeah, he shut that down real quick once I got to school.
Brad, of course, being the head coach of McKendree, for people that aren't as familiar
Hmm.
with McKendree, great guy. I can't wait to have him on the podcast. We're going to do a couple episodes, actually. I have a lot of things that I plan on just tying him down and making him help me do with his wealth of wisdom and experience. Going into our senior year, we're still training 6 days a week. Talk us into kind of football. I'm assuming you're not competing during football, you're just more training. Talk us into that senior year season of powerlifting, all the way up to high school nationals and kind of what that experience was like.
So it's kind of a long story, but basically what happened was the summer after my junior year, I qualified for APF nationals and I went in and I did that in I believe it was Salt Lake City, Utah. I did that around July, the summer before going into my senior year, and that meet I set a world record in, and that's what really kind of made my name known, especially in my hometown, is this kid's the real deal in powerlifting. And, the Chicago Tribune wrote a story on me and lots of cool things like that. But as
Can you
soon
tell me
as
what that
that,
world record was?
it was the bench press for 16, 17-year-old, 165 pounds. I benched 330. It was the WPC world record. I also broke the world record in total that day too. But some kid who beat me there, he went and took that from me, but I was able to outbench him and take that world record. But yeah, but that meet happened during my summer camp of football going into senior year because we'd have lifting, we'd have technique drills during the summer, and my coach, he was so understanding, and he allowed me to take a couple days off just to get ready for that. And when that meet was over, I'm like, all right, I'm going to be all into football. I'm going to give it my everything. And this is my last year. I'm going to make it count. And day one, we got our shoulder pads and helmet. We got our full pads. Me and my best friend, he didn't play at the same high school. He lived in the same town as me, but he went to a private Catholic high school and played football there. And me and him put the pads on, put the helmet on one night just to kind of bang the rust out of him. And he ended up tearing my AC joint in my shoulder. That was really hard on me having that happen right before my senior year of football. And I was planning to want to go to McKendree to power lift because my junior year is when they started to reach out to me and I started to reach out to them. So when I tore my shoulder, I called my dad and he came and picked me up, took me to the ER. They told me I kind of have like a hard head, but they told me no lifting for 8 weeks, no football for 8 weeks. Then the next day I showed up to practice and still played and benched after that. And I was, I just kind of had a hard head, didn't really, like I said, I had a really big problem with having people tell me what I could or couldn't do. So I played the rest of my football season and my shoulder weirdly healed during that senior year of football. I mean, my dad bought me a shoulder brace and I wore that the entire season just to hold my shoulder together and it just healed. I never had a problem with it during the season. And as soon as football ended, which was our season ended later because we went to the deep into the playoffs. I did a APF meet like as soon because like I said, I was training for powerlifting during my football season, waking up at 4 a.m. every day, and it was hard to put strength on as I have football going on. I was still able to do it.
At 18, there's a lot of things you can do that you can't do at 25, 30, 35. So,
Right. Right. And I went into that. I was lighter. I was like 170 pounds because I just competed 165 that summer and just had a whole football season. So I decided to put some weight on and go up a weight class just to get my lifts to go off the
climb, yeah.
rails. And I did that meet. I got best lifter, and I did 5 meets as soon as in a matter of 5 months after my football season ended.
5 meets,
And
5 months.
and every single one of them I did, I was able to get best lifter. I was able to get first.
Were you
But
seeing progress?
no, if you go on open powerlifting, you can see my total set at like 1370, 1380. It was sitting there. It wasn't going anywhere. But I mean, that was a good enough total to get me the dots I needed to get best lifter and succeed. So I did a meet for APF and then I did the USAPL
Frozen
frozen
iron, so yeah.
iron. I did that and qualified for high school nationals. Then I did Illinois State that next month.
Which we actually were at together, ironically.
Yeah,
Small world.
right. And eventually, with me not really knowing that you can't do 5 meets in 5 months, you
That's what
can't do that.
before we get into high school nationals and stuff, let's talk about two things. Have you seen any flare up from your shoulder injury lately? Do you have any pain or anything like that?
When I go heavy on bench, I can feel a little bit of a sharp pain, but it doesn't really bother me to the point where I can't bench anymore.
Yeah. I just, because one, you're very, like you said, you're very stubborn.
Mhm.
You're young. It sounds like your ability to handle pain or at least handle abuse on your body is very high because of what you were already
Yeah,
putting yourself through. But I say this because I don't want the audience to think that. Is that something you would honestly recommend in hindsight now?
absolutely not. I mean, it's just, and it gets to a point where the physical abuse that you're putting yourself through with all this training and stuff, it eventually starts to affect you mentally. And it caused me to not be in a good place mentally for a while. So I would not recommend that for people to do what I did.
Exactly. If you don't mind talking, what do you mean it was not in a good place? Kind of, because I don't think, all everybody wants to talk about the highs, PRs and
Mhm.
dealing with that, but there is a dark side to powerlifting, and we talked about it a little bit, and I'm sure this is where it's going to go through, but not progressing can take you into a really bad mental standpoint. Being stagnant is unfortunately why I think a lot of lifters only last 2 or so years, because you know that. So talk us, what was causing you um that kind of shift of mentality of being a little bit lower than you were. And then I want to talk to you about those kind of 5 meets being stagnant and see if that had anything to do with it. So go ahead and tell us what was. I'm sure you were going through a lot of pain. So just talk us a little bit what you meant by you were in a dark place.
Like I can remember my back, my knee, my shoulder was constantly in pain. I mean, I was still able to, like you said, you're 18, you can do. I mean, you're like Superman. So I
Hmm.
I was able to hold myself to a high pain standpoint. Um, but like mental wise, I would say I just being like, okay, I need to win this meet. I need to win that meet. I need to break this record. I need to break that record. That didn't put me in a good place mentally for a while. And my friends noticed, my family noticed. They called me out on it, and I just wasn't happy, I would say, because I was constantly trying to chase the next goal, chase the
Hmm.
next record, chase the next meet. And going into high school nationals was one of the toughest things I've ever had to do in my life
So
because
at that point, it sounds like you weren't training and competing for the love anymore. It was almost like you were setting goals to get your worth.
Mhm. Yeah, I
You were
was
trying to define who and how good of a person you were from the achievements you could step on the platform, which I think is a negative trait of almost any athlete or just anybody in general. We sometimes look for outside factors just to determine what our worth is, realizing that it's more about the connection that we have with people. What effect are we having, and that's a common mistake from a person so young. I guess the question I have is what kind of got you out of that funk? You said that your family and friends noticed. Was there a point where you just kind of what got you out of it? What helped you through that mentality of I'm only good if I succeed at this level?
my I would say my high school coach. I mean, I'll go ahead and his name is Chris Cassie. He got me out of that. He doesn't know it, but he really did. Going into high school nationals, I was putting myself through so much, and it was on my very last squat before heading to Louisiana. As I was going down, I felt a sharp pain in my knee, and I dumped it, and I just I broke down. I was losing it, and I called my coach, and I'm like, just rambling on to him about like, I'm not gonna win. This isn't gonna happen, and I'm like, I'm not gonna win. I don't see a point of going anymore. And he's like, and when I was on the phone with him, he's like, let me stop you right there. He's like, now you're acting like powerlifting is a job.
Mhm.
He's like, you started competing because you love it, right? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, what's make like, why are you so worried about winning and getting best lifter and getting breaking this record or that record? And I told him, I was like, I guess it's because what are people gonna think of me if I don't win? He's like, who cares what people think of you? He's like, he's like, you're doing powerlifting because you love it. He's like, if you're viewing it as a job, don't go to Louisiana. He's like, if you think it's a job, then why are you even doing this? And me and him talked about some other things, and he really he really eased me down mentally. And going into high school nationals, the month right after the Illinois State, I trained with him every single day. You know, he helped me with my squat depth, and he helped me with pauses on bench, giving me commands, all that kind of stuff. And I owe him so much for that. And he's someone who I really, even after college meets and after every meet I do, he's the first person I call and tell him how it went. And you know, he calls me, he texts me, he checks up on me at random times, and he was really the one who got me out of that uh mental place I was
Sounds
in.
like a real coach, not just a
Hmm.
sports coach. And I love hearing stories because that's what I try to be to my athletes. Like, I pour everything I have. You see me at all these events. Like, I'm anywhere and everywhere to help raise money, to help support them to go to nationals and things like that. Coaching is more than just making them good at a sport. Um,
Right.
I personally believe my job as a coach is to make them better people. And I just use a sport to do that. And I think that I love hearing about other coaches that have that mentality as well. I want to talk to you a little bit because he made a great point, and we talked about this. You were dealing with the pressure of just needing to be a winner, to break records. And I've seen a lot of people want to, kind of leave the sport because, they get stagnant, their total only changes by like 5 kilos in a year or whatever, and they just want to give up. Kind of
Hmm.
talk me
Right.
through what you've done to prepare yourself or to kind of overcome that. I know you talked to your coach and you made some realizations, but I guess what is your mind state now, I guess, with powerlifting, now that you're even on a team, you've probably got a scholarship, so there is still added
Mhm.
pressure to perform. Would you say that because you dealt with that your senior year, you've learned how to handle it better this coming years, or do you still feel that much pressure? Kind of talk to us about where you're head, because I mean you're about to go to your first
Mhm.
CNATs. I know McKendree has a lot of hope this year, to
Mhm.
do well overall on both raw and equipped. So kind of tell me where your headspace is at, knowing that you've seen rock bottom, but you're still up against a lot of pressure.
I mean, recently I was starting to head back into that mental space I was last year. And coach Jimmy Freeman and Brad Beckel and my old high school coach, I even talked to him the other day because I was just, training hasn't, I was having a couple not so great days in training, and a lot of things were getting in my head. And I even talked to my dad for a while, and I was starting to fall back into that spot I was in last year of, oh, I have to go into CNATs. I have to win. Like I've had and of course I'm going to go into CNATs, and my coaches are going to set me in the place where I can do everything I possibly can to win. But my coaches were also like, Coach Freeman and Coach Beckel and my old high school coach, she was like, you're only a freshman. They're like, you're putting all this pressure on yourself and you're only a freshman. You're going up against juniors and seniors from Texas who have been doing this their entire life. And
That literally were born with a barbell in their hand,
right,
because
right,
they do it different. I can't wait to get some Texas powerlifters on this podcast because
right, yeah,
I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what the meat in those cows or whatever they're doing on that ranch or whatever. But I mean, it's a huge sport in Texas.
yeah.
But go ahead, keep on going with. So basically, your coaches have kind of pulled you or allowed you to see from a different perspective, kind of realize that this is not the end of the
Mhm.
world, that actually putting all this pressure is actually what's probably causing those bad training days
Mhm.
because you're not in the right state. I love the fact that, don't let me rephrase that. I hate that you're going through that, but it's a good understanding for our audience to kind of realize that you can overcome something and it still jump up
Right.
in the next season. Like, unfortunately, we're humans, we're built for on patterns, and if you have a common mental block or a mental condition that's, because you put too much pressure on yourself, or you don't, you put too, just, or you feel depression constantly or something like that, just because you
Mhm.
deal with it once doesn't mean it's never going to come back. And I think
Right.
you're a good story to kind of say, like, hey, if that does come back, know who you need to go to. Who helped you get out of it that first time? Once you start realizing it, call it out ahead of time so you can nip it in the butt quicker. So it's a great story. So definitely, so CNAT's still a little pressure on you. Talk us just a little bit about where you're at from going into it, like how you think you're going to place, kind of where your coach is kind of transitioning you to. And then I want to go backpedal a little bit, and I want to talk about the differences between training on your own and training with a coach. So let's, so that people understand why you're so have a little pressure on you. Kind of tell me, where you're looking at placing and kind of what you're expecting from CNATs, because I think that explains why you have pressure on you.
Right. And it all kind of started to occur, I would say, after the William Jewell Invitational we did. I walked in there and I mopped the floor. I mean, I got best lifter, and everyone raised their eyebrows at me. And and the collegiate national rankings came out, and I was number 2. And I was in a
Now, was
panic
that
mode at that time.
was that just in your weight class? Yeah, I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, that's in the 90 kg equipped weight class and at the collegiate level. And I was starting to feel all this pressure on me, and it's a time from, I would say, November, December until pretty much recently. And I opened up a little bit to Coach Jimmy and Coach Brad, and they really helped me through that and really talked me through that. And right now I'm just mentally cleared. I'm just focused on going into Oklahoma and doing my best, scoring the best amount of points I can for the team, and hoping that we can, like McKendree, we're hoping that McKendree Powerlifting there will make some, will raise some eyebrows. That's kind of the ultimate goal.
Yeah. So, like I said, I just wanted to point that out because there's there's pressure that you naturally put on yourself because you want to do good, and then there's the pressure thinking or having that hope or that expectation that you're going to really achieve something big. And being ranked second does add a sense of pressure to a team that has some big hopes this year. So I just
Right.
wanted the audience to understand kind of where you were coming from that. So let's backpedal a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about some of the things that you've learned coming to McKendree now that, you're not self-coaching. You actually have learned what the word recovery means. Talk to me a little bit about the differences in your training, in your recovery, in your mindset about lifting, as far as like what you're doing to prepare for those, big lifts and things like that. Just walk me through how McKendree's made you a better strength athlete.
Well, I'll start with the last total I had before I came to school was 1500, around 1500. That was a meet I did that was the teen World Cup thing in Wisconsin. That was the high school World Cup. I totaled 1510, I believe. That was I did a quit, but I did raw with wraps. And my recent total in the collegiate Midwest regionals at McKendree, I totaled 1630 raw, and I totaled 1740 equipped at the William Jewell, and numbers are still rising. And it's just the fact of
And that we're talking 4 to 6 months.
just
Yeah.
having a. And for my last raw meet was the Illinois State Championship, my senior year of high school. I totaled around 1370, around there, and just in a matter of months, my raw total went from 1370 to 1630. And that's just from having two coaches who, especially Brad Beckel, there's not something you can ask him and he won't know. He knows, like, he just knows. And what I will like to add about Brad is a lot of coaches get mad at you when you ask questions. He loves it when you ask him questions because he cares about his lifters getting better. I mean, just like my high school coach, getting better is his number one priority, and improving yourself. And Brad and Jimmy really taught me how to rest and ease it down. Like, you don't have to walk in the gym and squat this every day. You don't have to walk in the gym, bench that every day.
You're
And
not going to get better doing 365 days of the year.
Right. And because I have two coaches like that, my numbers are rising, 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 and they're still going. I mean,
Talk to me real quick. So, as a person that, and I don't know because we didn't say, but as a person that was doing a lot of singles, a lot of heavy stuff, regular and regular and regular, what was that first coached hypertrophy block like? How was that volume on your body? Kind of talk to, because a lot of teen lifters do prescribe to, a very, very high weight, low rep mentality at the first of their training. And then when they first experience a hypertrophy block where they're doing 4, 5, 6 sets of 6, 8, 10s, their body is just not accustomed to that. And they don't
right.
realize how hard 50 and 60% max rep ranges can be on a body. Talk to us a little bit about how that was like.
I remember when I got to school, and because Jimmy's the one who programs me, he's the one who gives me my program. And I remember when I got there and he handed me my program, or he sent it to me on the email, and I looked at it. It was like a 4x15. I'm like, what? At like RP6. I'm like, okay, this is new to me.
Was that on
Like this
barbell
is
lift or was that accessory?
that was on barbell lift. That was on squat. I was like, okay, like at first I was kind of like, all right, I'm not too sure about this because I've never done this, but I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna trust the process. I'm gonna listen to my coaches, and talking to young lifters out there and young athletes listening to this, trusting the process and listening to your coaches is the number one thing you can do for success. It just listening to people with experience and especially trusting the process and trusting yourself is gonna do nothing but lead you to success. But and like I said earlier about me lifting 6, 7 days a week, Brad shut that down real quick. He was like, no, you're going to lift 5 days a week and you're going to do what we tell you to do. And because I did that, I've been very satisfied with my numbers.
I mean, who wouldn't with almost a 200 to 300 pound increase in total,
Right.
depending on, such a short time. So volume changed, recovery changed, just your mentality has changed. I want to talk, and this is the first time I'm talking to an athlete about this, but I think with just your work ethic and your natural grit to kind of overcome hard times, I want to talk to you. I want to step onto the platform, basically. Talk to me how you prepare mentally to go onto that platform, because a lot of people do it differently. A lot of people just kind of go wing it, and I'm not a big fan of that way either. Talk to me about how you, like I said, what are you thinking about? What the focus is? You know, what is it that drives you to not give up on the platform and push those heavy weights as hard as you can?
Well, I would say getting the job done first, even that's if that's in training or in a meet, just getting it done and going in and executing like I need to is my number one priority. And mentally preparing for that, I've told people about this and they've said it's weird and some have told me it's kind of weird how I do it. I run through my head all those things that those teachers and those coaches and those classmates and friends have used to say to me back in freshman, sophomore year, telling me what I can or can't do. I can't do this, you can't do that. I would just listen to that and be like, screw them. And that's what really drives me and energizes me for another set or another rep or doing what I need to do on the platform on meet day. It's just having that constant motivation from those people who constantly disrespected me. It really turned me into the person I am today.
I mean, I think that's a common thing. I think, like I said, too many people. I see two things on the platform. I see too many laid back,
Mhm.
like, they're not getting enough energy, and I see them, the weight gets hard and they let the spotters take it too soon. Like, could you have grinded that a little more if you were in a more mental tough
Mhm.
place? And then I see a lot of lifters that kind of go into that ultimate warrior shaking the ropes mentality, and
Yeah.
they get so far amped that they can't control themselves and they mess up, they misgroove, like, their hip gets it out of alignment
Mhm.
on a squat, or they take a step before the command comes or something like that. because they get so angst and so hyped up that they can't control themselves. So I'm trying to, and what I tell people is, one, everybody's going to have a different thing that motivates you. Like you said, yours is the naysayers. Mine's, I'm always thinking about something happening to my daughter, because there's nothing, honestly, I think I could take 15 shots to the chest if I saw something happening to my daughter, because that's that mentality I need. But not only am I getting amped to kind of go to war and be able to handle, the world on my shoulders, but I still have to have a calmness and a poise to execute technique properly. So I like to talk to people about how you juggle getting here but still being able to stay focused and execute at this level, because you never want to, I don't ever want to hit a lift or feel like I could have gave more after I missed a lift. Like I just don't want that. I want them to take the weight from me because it's about to crush me, not because I gave up. And I think like I said, as teenagers and things like that, I'm just trying to find a better way to kind of teach that to my kids, teach that to my athletes, because no offense, some of y'all haven't had to deal with a lot in life. Y'all aren't as experienced.
Right.
So I just kind of wanted, as someone that has gone through a lot of grit, I love what you say. Where would you say you fall on the kind of ampness scale when you're preparing for that third attempt? Like a 1 to 10 scale, would you say you're like super, super amped, or are you trying to keep somewhat of a level head?
A 1 to 10, I would probably give it an 8 out of 10. And that's
That's a
something
perfect
I'd like
answer, I
to
think.
add, right? And something I'd like to add is, especially coming to McKendree, Brad has really taught me two things with going into a heavy lift. You need to be violent, but you also need to be calm and focus on your technique, because that is the most important thing. And he taught me those two things, and whenever I put those two things together, things that I didn't even know I was capable of happens.
Uh,
And
those are great phrases to use, probably a lot more elegant than what I was trying to say. But I think that, like I said, I don't think too there's not enough kids that are learning that lesson on the platform early enough. And that's holding them back, either because they missed a lift because they were excessively violent and not calm enough, or they miss a lot of lifts because they're too calm and their bodies and minds just give up on the lift too early. So it was kind of neat to talk to you about that. It's the first time I've actually brought that up in an episode, and something I'll probably do a little more, because I just think it's a good tool. I don't think a lot of coaches talk about that enough. Everybody's talking technique, execution. No one's talking, or at least I don't hear it as much, about how to get into that position in your mind. Because like I said, at that point, your body's done everything it can do. Like, you've put in all the training. Now it's, can you make your mind tell the body how and what to do. And that takes a mental aspect that I don't think we're training enough youth athletes and teen athletes in yet. So that was a good violent but controlled. I like that. I'm gonna write that down real quick, because that's a good t-shirt for later.
Yeah.
So, anything else that you think really just makes your story stand out? I know we've talked about a lot of things and we've jumped around the last year and a half, but anything that I might have missed that you think would be a good story or a good lesson for our audience?
I'd say let's add going into high school nationals and what that was like.
Okay, so let's rewind a little bit. We were competing multiple times, and this is your senior year. We're competing a bunch of times. High school nationals would have been your fourth out of 5 meets at this point, or is it your fifth?
But it was my fourth.
Okay,
And
so we've been competing this 3 months, 3 competitions, still training 6 days a week. Kind of lead us into that story then.
so like I said, after my senior year of football, I was like, all right, I'm all into powerlifting. I want to go to McKendree. I want to powerlift there. Powerlifting's what I want to do. And I was lifting 181, and I needed to maintain that weight. I was trying all I can with those short time periods in between meets to just maintain my body weight at
What were you climbing
181.
up to, like a week after the meet? What were you sitting at?
Close to 190.
So you're adding about
Because
8 or 9 pounds of either
and
water weight, bloat, food intake, whatever it is. So about 9 pounds.
right. And in the sport of powerlifting, you need food in your body to function. You have to have it. And it's not I'm not like talking bad about wrestling, but wrestlers cut a bunch of weight and they just eat some food, they're energized again, they're ready to go. But with powerlifting, you need food in long time periods to be stronger, to maintain your strength. The problem was is those meats were starting to catch up on me, that constant load I was putting on my body from all that training, all those meats.
Being in a
And
deficit too long, too.
right.
Yep, keep going.
And it got to the point where I was growing and growing more muscle, and I was just too big to maintain 180. So it was 2, 3 days before high school nationals, getting ready to go to Louisiana, and I'm weighing about 187 pounds. I'm about 6 pounds over, which shouldn't be too bad for a water cut. And I water cut for a couple of days. My weight only dropped down to like 186. And the day before
Let's
the meet,
let's talk water. Like when you say cut, are you overhydrating for a certain amount of days and then depleting yourself, or are you just trying to go depletion automatically?
it's so I had two big like milk jugs of water, and I chug two of those whenever I do a water cut. That way, I'm peeing everything out
Yeah.
and getting that weight down, and then cutting off water. I would like when I was thirsty, have a sip of water or something like that, but I'm not just
Okay.
sitting there drinking water.
So I'm gonna give you a little bit of tip, um, and this is just from what I've read from a lot of people and what I've done. Is too many people only try to do a water load for one day. Absorb an amount on one day, where your body
Right.
doesn't always naturally react to one off. So, like, what I would do, like, if I'm trying to water cut, I'll have 3 days of progressive water overload, not a little bit later. So, like, say if I'm weighing Saturday, I might do Monday 1.5 gallons, Tuesday 2 gallons, Wednesday 2.5 gallons, and then
Interesting.
Thursday
Okay.
I have a half a gallon, and then by Friday and Saturday, because like it depends on when I'm weighing in. I compete in a lot more 24-hour weigh-ins, but
Mhm.
you can deplete a lot more. But now be very careful with that, because with a 2-hour weigh-in, sometimes you can deplete too much by that, because that's what a lot of like
Uh-huh.
fighters will do. But they of course deplete a lot of weight and but then have 24 hours to reload. So just be cautious with that. But I have seen a lot of people mess up a water load because your body doesn't always overreact to a one off. It's the same
Right.
concept. If you only have 500 calories on one day, are you going to lose 7 pounds? No, because your body doesn't,
Right.
it has storage and has already built up the capability of handling the odd day. You store water in your body just in case for some reason you're not going to get it for 6 or 8 hours. So it can handle certain things like that. All right, go back. We're water loading. It's a day before, and you said you were 6 pounds still overweight.
A day before I was about 5.5, 6 pounds over, and this was day before the meet. Me and my mom, we're from Chicago, so we had to wake up. Me and my me and my mom. My mom's the one who took me to high school nationals, and we had to wake up at 2 a.m. And usually, what I do is I'll drink a little bit of caffeine or a cup of coffee just to
Mhm.
kind of because that helps flush everything out of me. And so I wake up. I'm about
Helps flush out the other
180. Mhm.
the other.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I was 186 when I woke up at 2 a.m. And the last time I ate was maybe 10 hours before that, which was like a small chicken salad.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, I'm about 5 or 6 pounds over. I need to be careful here. So all I did was have a cup of coffee, and we get to the airport. I had my scale in my backpack with me. So I went in the airport bathroom, weighed myself. Okay, I'm 186 still. And we get on planes. Me and my mom had to take about 2 or 3 planes to get there. And when I got there, I weighed myself. I'm 185. I'm like, okay, this is not looking good. It's like 3 p.m. and I have to weigh in the morning and compete for a national title. And this is not looking good for me. And so what I did was I put on a couple layers of long pants, two sweatshirts, put towels under the cracks of the door in my hotel room, turn the sink water on as hot as I could, turn the shower water on as hot as I could, trying to make a sauna for myself to sweat everything out.
I was about to say you needed a $10 sauna suit at that point. You can get those at Walmart.
Yeah, and Brad was texting me. He's like, "How you feeling? You ready?" I'm like, "Yeah, you could say that." I'm like, and I was like, I'm honestly not feeling good. I'm like, and this is again where the bad mental place that I was in was coming back to me, and he was like, "Okay, well, you know how," and he texted me. It's kind of funny. He's like, "You know how to eat, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, you can face this adversity, and then you can refeed for success tomorrow because you didn't forget how to eat."
Mhm.
So I didn't eat in a matter of about 40-ish hours, maybe a couple sips of water, a cup of coffee, and that's it. And not eating for that long really played an effect on my performance the next day. As you saw, I went 4 for 9. I weighed in at 181.3,
So
6 ounces under,
Yep.
just barely made weight. I'm like, all right, I made weight. So my mom had a bunch of food for me. I scarfed that down. Then I threw that up because I
Because
ate it
you
way too
overloaded your
fast.
system. Yeah.
And I threw up, and I was like, all right, well, I'm going on the national platform in front of the best high schoolers in the country, and I have zero food in my system, and my confidence is just so I called my high school coach that morning. I'm like, all right, you got to get me right because I'm not doing all right now. He's like, well, you made weight, so now you got to go get the job done. He's like, so go get the job done. And I went in there and I went 4 for 9. Only got my squat opener, only got my deadlift opener. I got my first and second bench, and that's it. And I was able to come away with first and come away with best lifter.
So two things I want to. So one, we learned that competing that many times, especially in a cutting, having to cut for weight. One, you're not going to progress in strength if you're competing that often because you're never giving your body time to get bigger and stronger. Two, the added weight of the cuts definitely played a role in your capacity. But I want to focus on something, and I want to see if you think now that you've witnessed what powerlifting coaching is. Because my first instinct hearing your story is one, you probably set your openers way too high for how your body felt. So, and that's just me hearing your 4 minute story. That's the first thing I would have changed. So talk to me a little bit. Okay, you had a horrible meet. You didn't do anything right, or I don't want to say anything right, but you were doing way too many things wrong to go in here on a high, ready to compete at your best. What are some of the things that you feel like now that you've been tutored by an actual strength coach, what things would you have changed going into that high school nationals? Because you don't have the power of hindsight in the moment, but maybe through hindsight now we can teach some other athletes things to change.
I would say, from what I've learned from my coach's standpoint, is stress is the worst thing you can do because stress will affect your strength, stress will affect your body weight.
Mhm.
So
Your
don't.
eating, your how do I want to, your hunger or what, your nutritional
Mm,
capacity, stress
yeah,
can either make you want to eat more or less, which I guess
right.
goes back into the body weight, but
So it's not stressing as much, and I guess just not stressing. I mean, stress is the worst thing you can possibly do, and like I said, for a while during my senior year during powerlifting, I wasn't in a good mental standpoint just because of how stressed I was on constantly needing to prove that person wrong, prove this person wrong, win that meet, get best lifter in this meet, break this record, break that record. So I
okay.
would say what my coach
Okay.
has really taught me is not being calm and not stressing your mind overboard.
Okay. So that's an easy thing to say. How do you do that though? Because I can say, don't get stressed out about it, but people look at you like, well, how the am I supposed to do that? Like, so talk to me about some techniques you've learn throughout your tenure there now to keep yourself? I know that you talk to your coaches and get advice and stuff, but is there
Yeah.
anything else that you do that kind of helps you relieve your stress to where you can be at a good place?
I would say just really focusing on not viewing this as a job, is just viewing this as something I love because that's such an important lesson my high school coach taught me last year was not viewing it as a job because if you're viewing it as a job, then why are you doing it? And the fact of me now not viewing powerlifting as a job, viewing it as something I love, my stress is way down now. I would also say when you're starting to get stressed out and starting to think about it a lot, think about something else or hang out with a friend or just that's easy for
Distract
me to
yourself.
say, but distract yourself. And
Yeah.
I like with me when it comes to I was starting to get really stressed out for a while before my last meet because I wasn't because I'm an equipped lifter and I'm not a raw lifter, so I was just stressing out about that and stressing out if I'm going to lose and I was able to and some of my teammates I met this year are my best friends. That's another reason why powerlifting is such a great thing for the youth to have just because of the people that you meet. And, my best friends in the team, I would just go hang out with them or not think about powerlifting at all. And that really brought my stress levels from here to here
Mhm.
just by distracting myself and not viewing powerlifting as a job.
Okay. So two questions that you brought up. One, what would you do different on competition day? I know I gave my first suggestion, but are there any things that now being a more experienced from a coach's standpoint, or at least experiencing that you would have done on competition day, you think, for that high school nationals?
I wish I just focused on the people who supported me because I was like, I'm like, all right, it's my senior year. I can win a national championship and I can go shove it in those people's face and I can go shove it in those naysayers' faces.
Mhm.
That was my number one focus. But I wasn't really focusing on my parents who had sacrificed so much for me to powerlift, sacrifice money and sacrifice trips for me to make to powerlift. And I didn't focus on, my high school coach. I didn't really focus on my high school coach or my friends who wanted to see me succeed. I was just so incredibly focused on the naysayers and proving them wrong instead of knowing how good of a corner I have because
Yeah.
I still have some incredible people in my
So
corner.
I want to word that in a certain way. Sometimes,
Uh,
don't get me wrong, trying to prove naysayers or trying to envision, something bad happening to motivate you, that's all good. But when you're in a defeated place, sometimes that isn't the best motivation because that's bringing someone that's already feeling somewhat negative or down into an even more negative down potential. So, what I think glorifying the people you have on your side, saying, "Hey, I'm doing this for my mom because she's here with me,
uh,
and I want her to see her son execute all the hard work he's put in." You know, I want to thank my dad for all the what he's probably still at work and not able to come because he's having to
yeah,
afford this trip. I want to give him glory or make
right.
him proud by performing at my best. So, and I say this because in certain seasons of your competitive life and just your standard life, your motivation is going to need to come from other different places because sometimes what was working isn't going to work in this season. So I
Right.
think that's kind of where I felt like you were trying to lead us. Where is
Yeah,
if
I
you would
was.
have if you would have started just saying, "Hey, you know what? I don't care what anybody else says that wishes me harm or wishes me unsuccess. I'm here for the people that are right behind me in the corner, the person that's going to cheer me on, the person that's watching that live stream back in Illinois cheering me on. I'm going to go perform my best from them." That way your mentality shifts. Right?
Right.
Is that what?
Yeah.
So that's a good point. And I want to say this is, and one of the things, and all the audience will hear this over again. I'm a huge believer in speaking stuff into existence, like tell the universe, pray about it, whatever you need to do in order to verbally speak it out. I think that the more you speak stuff into existence, the more your naturally mentality and your body will just go towards that and not allow yourself to quit. So, like I said, I might have a certain motivation on the platform to get me in that don't give up. But what I'm
Mhm.
using during like maybe my training might be something different because I need to hold this consistent motivation week in and week out. And if I'm always thinking, what happens to my daughter? What happens to my daughter? Eventually, I'm going to go psycho because I'm going to feel like something is about to happen to my daughter. So, learning
Right.
learning to use different motivational tools in different seasons is a big factor, and that was a good, awesome point. So the last point I think I want to get to, as someone that has experienced a big team sport like football, and then also experienced a team sport, but in an individual level. Talk to us a little bit about the differences that you see from a collegiate powerlifting team that you did from a football team, from a level of
Right.
support, a level of everybody's giving it their all, or just whatever you think the differences are. Cause I so wish, like, there's a lot of collegiate colleges out there with clubs, but the teams that actually are teams, I feel like I see so much different level of support and
Mhm.
camaraderie that I wish we could build more collegiate clubs into teams. I'm not necessarily care about the funding. I just care more about
Right.
y'all feel like y'all are responsible. Your actions lead to other people's actions as far as y'all have some responsibility to do well for the other person. So kind of talk to me a little bit about the difference between what it's like being on that kind of team versus this team, and just a little bit about McKendry's team from a lifter standpoint in general, to give that audience kind of an understanding what it's like.
So I would say when I got to McKendree, it was such a culture shock because I'm like, okay, everyone is here and everybody's in. Everyone's in, and I've never had an entire coaching staff who truly believes in me, who truly wants to see me succeed. I've never had that. And it's just the fact of going from high school football. I had a lot of teammates who just didn't care, and some guys who had all the potential in the world, but they just didn't care. And they didn't care to be there. They didn't care to give it their all. They didn't have that work ethic. And coming to McKendree was such a big culture shock for me because I have a team who wants to see me succeed. I have a team who works harder than me. And I'm very grateful for especially the leaders on in our program because seniors, Caden Colauer, Maxon Carnes, our senior captains, they're two guys who I truly learn from and pick things up from on whether that's hard work or being a good leader or just dedication. And especially going to McKendree, I found my best friends. I mean, those guys are like I view them as brothers. And I'm so grateful to have a coach like Brad Beckel who wants to see me succeed and who is so just knowledgeable in the sport. And same with Coach Freeman and he's the coach who programs me. I'm just so grateful to have two coaches like them. And I would say ultimately the comparison from a high school football team to a collegiate powerlifting team is just it being a big culture shock with seeing that everybody's in and everyone wants to win because everyone on our team wants to win and wants to be a part of something special.
Like I said, that definitely takes a different kind of culture, and it takes leadership to do that. So,
Uh-huh.
um, as a big fan of Jimmy and Brad, I understand what you mean by that. I can't wait. I have Jimmy scheduled next weekend at High School Nationals. We're going to do an episode
Okay.
together, and then I know Brad has promised me some time after collegiate to sit down with him and get his expertise. So I look forward to that. All right, so that's pretty much it for the episode as far as kind of getting to know you and your story, and hopefully influence someone through your story. But I'll ask
Right.
all my athletes two questions, because this is something that I struggle with as far as just as a person that just naturally wants to see the sport grow, especially in the youth and teen division.
Right.
In your opinion, what can powerlifting do to attract more youth and teen athletes to the sport? Your generation is like un any other generation that we've ever experienced. Your the ability to access information from a phone. your attention span,
Right.
your willingness to like go out on a limb and possibly fail because you're afraid someone's going to see it on there's just so many things that are so new to your culture. How if the gods of powerlifting came to you and said, how can we make this better? What would you tell them?
I would tell them just find more influencers because, like I said, Russell Ori is who I learned from and who kind of played a big role in making me want to start powerlifting. And influencers like not necessarily powerlifters, but just lifters in general who really help people I know start to want to powerlift, like guys like Lex Little and the Trend Twins and people like that. I would just say,
I hate hearing those as an example,
right, right.
but I know what you mean.
Mhm.
Basically content
Content is huge. I mean,
content
because
pointed out to that audience, which you're saying, or both kind of saying, why do you think I'm doing this podcast? Why do you think I'm trying to interview teenagers and collegiate athletes? Because they're going to care more about your story than they do my story.
right,
Because I'm just an old butthead. What I say doesn't matter because, I had to, you know, walk uphill both ways in snow to get to school versus, they did it online during COVID.
right.
So that I feel what anything else other than content and influence, what would you say that the sport could do better in order to make maybe it enticing? Is there something that, we're not doing a good job of or something like that is really making people push away from the sport?
Ugh, that's kind of a hard
No,
question.
no.
I mean,
It's just an opinion.
I
If you don't have anything, it's all good. It's just this is where I watched the episode back again. I'm like, okay, make that note, because I'm interviewing y'all because y'all are who I have access to as far as what can we do? Because I plan on going to the high school committee meeting next week at high
okay,
school nationals just to hear what they're saying in them and to give my opinion on other matters that maybe we need to change based on what I hear. So basically, I'm just trying to be an advocate for things that are going to make y'all more interested. Because I hate to tell you, I'd much rather see 500 youth and teenagers pick up this sport than I care about the 75-year-old. Don't get me wrong, the 75-year-old's awesome, but getting a 500 more youth and teens is going to change the outcome of the generations to come versus that 75. And at least in my head, that's what I see. So what
right.
else could we do or do better, you think, maybe?
I would say just, I mean, like I said, content is huge because that's all everyone's doing nowadays is just on their cell phones. And that's how I came into play with powerlifting is that's another big reason is just when I saw Russell Ori winning his IPF World Championship, I was like, that's even though I don't know what the sport is, that's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah.
I would just say content. I
Okay.
mean, just
I
reaching
definitely
out to
see
heavy
a lot of
lifters.
that coming out. I just don't necessarily know. I think it's turning into a lot of people training like a power lifter. I don't know if it's turning
Mhm.
a lot of people into power lifters that are
Right.
constantly doing competitions and stuff like that. So the last question that I ask everybody is basically if let's say sophomore from your high school came to you and goes, hey, I've been thinking about doing a competition. Why should I train and compete? Like, tell me what you would tell that person about why powerlifting has been so impactful in a more short, detailed version. But what would you tell that teenager, like, dude, if you just do this, and this may occur in your life? Because that's what occurred to me.
I would say you're capable of anything. I mean, you can do anything you want to do in life, and that's something I've really learned from my high school coach and learned from myself even with just training alone every day. Dreams are possible. I mean, and like also telling them the people you're going to meet are people that you're going to be very thankful that you met because I've met a lot of fantastic people in the sport and I wouldn't trade them for the world. I would say that's about it, what I would tell them.
No, that's good. There can't be enough people telling other people that they can do whatever they want. I think it's definitely a phrase that's getting undertold nowadays. I think I would just add to the point is don't say they can do whatever they want. Add the caveat as long as they work there to get to it,
Right.
because sometimes we give one message, but not the requirement of what it's actually going to take. Sometimes
Right.
people think they're going to get handed their dreams rather than them working their butt off to achieve their dreams. So that'd be the only 2 cents I add to that. All right, Parker, man,
Okay.
it was a great
All
episode.
right.
We learned a lot. I think it was a great story. Like I said, you're a very hardworking, dedicated man.
Thank you.
And I know the sky's the limit for someone with that kind of grit and just willingness to, go through day in and day out. So I can't wait to watch you at high school nationals. I know, or collegiate nationals. My fault. I got high school nationals on the
No,
brain
you're
because I'm
okay.
going next week. Can't wait to watch you in Oklahoma City. I know me and my daughter will have you on the big screen cheering McKendree on.
Oh,
But thank you for coming on here, man. And to all the guests, thank you for watching. As always, stay strong. Thank y'all.